Hi, everyone. We can start the session now. In this session, you're going to hear about 10 cool things about SQL Managed Instance. My name is Danny Lipava, and I'm with the Managed Instance product group. I've been there since day one when Managed Instance launched, and the GA was in November of 2018. Here are the links if you want to connect to me or talk to me after the session if you have more questions. So 10 cool things about MI that we want to talk about that maybe you did or did not know. It, it is hosted on great hardware. We're going to talk about it more in details. We now support very large instances, up to 16 terabytes. We have a lot of security improvements. We now support legacy authentication protocols like Windows Auth. We have favorite tech for troubleshoot, well, almost. We now have ability to reach for the big data to sync with Azure Synapse. We have improved data loading speed. I'm going to talk about some very unique PaaS features for SQL Managed Instance. And we have great tools for automation. In my session, I will double click on each one of these topics. Now, talking about premium series hardware, with the earlier generation of MI hardware, generation 5, this is what we had. This is what we had before. So we have Intel Broadwell CPU, Skylake, 2.5 gigahertz, 4080 cores, 5.1 gigabytes of memory per vCore. A lot of customers maybe found that not to be sufficient for their workloads. And then we had limitation in the disk storage space for general purpose and business critical, 8 and 4 terabytes. Probably if you know, managed instance is offered in 2 service tier. General purpose is an equivalent of FCI, what FCI clusters are on-prem. And BC, business critical, would be always on version of managed instance. Today, we're announcing 2 new SKUs. You can choose between premium series and memory optimized. So I've pointed out what's different, what's new. So faster, better CPUs. More memory per vCore. Our standard offering now has 7 gigs of memory per vCore. And if you really need lots of memory, then choose memory optimized SKU. Well, we will get 13.6 gigabytes of memory per vCore. We've bumped up the storage space significantly, so you can host your workloads up to 16 terabytes. In the standard offering, for business critical, it's 5.5, but if you choose the memory optimized SKU, then both service tiers are up to 16 terabytes of storage space. In order for that to happen, there are some requirements. We require for the maximum of 16 terabytes of storage to use at least 16 vCores. And displayed here, if it zoomed in, it doesn't really zoom it in, okay, are the limitations that we have in terms of IOPS per file and throughput per file and how that all actually works. Moving along, extra security for managed instance. So managed instance is hosted in a virtual cluster. That means that it has a security isolation, so it's very, very, very secure. It does not have shared resources, does not have noisy neighbors. So lots of our enterprise customers love that. Another thing that our enterprise customers love is VNet support, so connecting to managed instance through VPN. So it's not really exposed natively to any of the outside of the network on the internet. You can control your own subnets in that VNet. DBs are encrypted with TD, then TLS encryption is used for communication. You can, if you want to, have public endpoint for managed instance, but you control that if you want to turn it on or off. By default, it is off. You can also choose if you want to have Azure AD only authentication, which is more secure than the typical standard SQL Server login. We support managed identities in Azure. We support now storage endpoints policy. That's a new thing. And another really cool feature that we've just released last week is ability to use Windows authentication for managed instance. Before, it was not possible. So you can have your users, your applications log in as they were, especially if you're doing lifts and shifts scenarios. What needs to happen first on the right-hand side, you see that we have the Azure AD, and then we have Active Directory on-prem. First, we need to bridge the two, so there has to be trust established between on-prem Active Directory and Azure AD. Once that trust is established, then you can use, your applications can use Winoth. How does that work? Client requests the standard Kerberos ticket to managed instance using the Winoth protocol. Then at the backend, that is verified against Azure AD. And by the way, remember that the trust with the on-prem Active Directory was already established, so Azure AD can say, hey, this is cool, you're good, and the user can log in. Number 5, transactional replication. How are we doing on time, by the way? 5 minutes, okay. Transactional replication is something else that we also support on managed instance, the way for you to move data. We support all the roles of the publisher, distributor, post subscriber, push subscriber. Some things that we do not support is merge replication, peer-to-peer, and updatable subscriptions. But for all intents and purposes, managed instance is your great destination for transactional replication. We've just added this week. This is a really, really cool thing that I want to talk about. It's the ability for managed instance to query data lake, to query Azure Synapse. And the way it works, I'm going to show on the next diagram. Just a reminder of how it worked before with SQL Server 2016. With 2016, it was complicated. There was a polybase. You need to have Azure Blob Storage. You could maybe use Hadoop. It was a complex system to set up. And starting from 2019, what we've done is we've made external tables possible, where you map an external table on SQL Server 2019 with your data lake sources. We've done exactly the same thing now for managed instance. So as of today, on managed instance, you can map an external table and point it to Azure Synapse. That means that from managed instance, you can query Azure Synapse Data Lake, and you can combine those results with querying your data on managed instance. So combining managed instance data and data lake data. Some of the ways our customer use it is, for example, run their operational workloads on managed instance and maybe store long-term archival data on data lake, but they can then pull it all online from single endpoint, which is managed instance. Another improvement that we made it possible now to load data lots faster. We've done some improvements in this space, and for general purpose managed instance, you need to use temp tables. And for business critical service tier, you would need to use either in-memory or temp tables. Some unique offerings that managed instance has in the PaaS space. As you can see on the screen, maybe I'm just going to call out cool things such as ability to execute CLRs. We support cross-DB transactions, 3-part name queries. So that's very, very unique. You can use linked servers, so maybe you can link managed instance with Azure SQL database or with other SQL servers like on-prem SQL Server or SQL Server in a VM. We support, we're mostly compatible with, we're actually the most compatible option with the standard SQL Server, so everything that's listed here goes along that compatibility. In terms of trace flags, we support a number of trace flags. We do not support at this point session trace flags yet, but two I would like to call out: parallel statistic sampling, dynamic memory grant for batch mode operations. Probably, if you are using managed instance, probably you know that you can set up managed instance in a failover group. It is essentially a DR scenario where you can provision managed instance, 2 managed instances, one in one Azure region, the other in the other Azure region, and you can have the data automatically being replicated from primary managed instance to the secondary managed instance for DR purposes, and then you can fail over. With the current setup, an issue with that was if you are running agent jobs on the failover, they will not automatically transfer over. and logins would also not be automatically replicated on the secondary managed instance. We've done some improvements in that space. There's an article and link that you can take a picture of or take a screenshot if you're online. In that article, we describe a solution with the scripts where an agent DB is created, which holds all the agent job data and helps you automatically transfer the agent jobs from primary to secondary managed instance, including the login jobs. There are some limitations. If a job is in progress during the failover, the progress will be lost, unfortunately. But then the job on the secondary will store automatically. Then when the job switching happens between primary and secondary, because it's a new instance, the history will be lost. And at the times, you will need to use the default owner as CA. All of that is listed in the article. Finally, I want to talk about migration story and the possible ways to migrate to managed instance. Typically, we've been if you want to migrate to managed instance, you would be using the DMS. DMS is Azure's tool, data migration service, and that service analyzes your SQL Server database. It tells you if you meet all the requirements to migrate to managed instance, and then it orchestrates that migration for you. However, under the cover, the data migration service uses log replace service, which is our version of log shipping. So recent improvement that we made is the ability to orchestrate migration manually by using our log replace service. How that happens is you would take the backup files on your SQL Server. That's shown the step number 1 on the diagram. And then you would upload those files on the Azure Blob Storage. As the workload progresses and it moves along, you'd be adding more and more files to that Azure Blob Storage. You would start the service, and the service would be restoring those backups from the Blob Storage automatically. As you add new files to the Azure Blob Storage, they're being automatically restored on managed instance until you say you want to cut over. And with that, you can completely orchestrate and control your migrations. Some of the examples for this would be maybe companies that have restricted policies where they cannot have maybe all the ports opened, where maybe they do not have access to the OS system or limited permissions. So manually orchestrating this migration and controlling where you actually migrate is something that we offer with log replace service. The latest innovation that we offer in the migration space, and maybe if you have been in SQL Server 2022 session, you've been hearing about the DR, is the link feature for managed instance. It was in a private preview for since last November, but as of this week for SQL Bits, it is now in an open public preview. What it is we now made it possible to extend the availability group from SQL Server on-prem to managed instance. How we do that? On managed instance, we already have an availability group, so we use distributed availability groups to connect the two availability groups together. What that means is that data is replicated automatically in near real time from SQL Server to managed instance. The database being replicated is in read-only mode, so before you migrate, you can actually use that read-only DB on MI to test that your migration is fine, that all of your data is over. And you can keep the link running for as long as you like, weeks and months at a time. The issue with the DMS and previous migration tools was that once you start the job, you need to complete it within 36 hours. So with this technology, we changed that. You can keep syncing the data for weeks and months at a time. And even use the data on MI for read-only reporting. When you're done, you fail over to the cloud, and that failover then completes the migration of your database to the cloud. You can use this scenario. There is a link per database, so you can use this scenario to migrate from multiple SQL servers to a single to a single managed instance, all simultaneously. The feature is supported for, at this moment, for the open public preview, we are making available to SQL Server 2019, and very soon we're gonna support 2016 and up. And our roadmap for this technology is to support all the SQL Server versions for 2016 and up. Currently, the requirement is that you would need to have an enterprise edition, but we will also make it possible to use distributed availability groups on standard edition. So that's a new improvement that we're going to make. And this offers the best online migration to managed instance. It's essentially instantaneous when you cut over the link. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. What I really would like to ask is that you leave your feedback on the session, scan the QR code. For every 10 feedbacks, there is going to be a tree planted. So we really want those feedbacks, right? And for all the participants here in the room, if you want to see me after the presentations, I have some MI t-shirts for you, like the one that I'm wearing. So you're welcome to that. Do we have any questions in the room or online? Yes, there's an online question. Oh, you had a question, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
For SQL 2022.
Yes.
They discussed that you will be able to go back and forth to MI.
Yes.
For DR.
Yes.
If I'm deciding to upgrade my on-prem installation, my on-prem server, I will go back to on-prem. How will MI keep up with updating to the correct version?
What do you want to go back to?
So basically, I want to upgrade my installation of on-prem. So I will go to MI.
Yes.
Okay, I will upgrade to a newer version, new CU on.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand the question. Yeah.
MI needs to keep up upgrade.
I understand. So the question was essentially about the DR scenario for SQL Server 2022. I'm just repeating the question for the online people to hear it. And then the question is, if I understood it well, if you have SQL Server 2022 on-prem, and then you make the link to managed instance, and then you install a CU on SQL Server 2022. So you wonder if, when you apply that CU, when you go to MI, if you will be able to go back and how we're going to all keep it up to sync. Is that your question? So the answer to that is we're going to make the link. So the link, in order to replicate a database, the database structure, the only requirement that we have is not CU bound. So you can install any CUs as you want. It will not affect us. So on-prem, you can install as many CUs as you want, and you will be able to move back and forth. What we care about when you have replication of a database using always-on technology, the structure of the database and metadata needs to remain the same. If that is not being upgraded by the CU, and by the way, we're not allowed to upgrade the change the DB structure in CUs, the replication will work back and forth. So to answer your question, CUs will not affect us. So whatever CU version you have, we'll be able to move back and forth. On the MI side, what we're going to do every time that CU comes from SQL Server 2022, we'll also update a similar CU on the MI side as well. But again, that has no effect of the ability to go back and forth. And I hope that answers your question. Tomorrow at 10, I will have a specific question on a specific session of on MI Link. So all of you that are interested specifically in this new link feature, you can come to the session tomorrow at 10. Any other questions in the room or online? Yes. Okay, so the question is to repeat this. With the Polybase, can we also link to the Oracle database or just data lake on MI? So the slide shown was just how SQL Server 2019 does it. In this case, we can only link to Azure Synapse, so nothing else. I cannot disclose this now, but we possibly are working on some improvements for Oracle, so stay tuned. That's all as much as I can say and read between the lines. Yep. Do we have more time? We're out of time. So thanks everyone for your session. Please leave feedback. Let's plant those trees. And you're welcome to grab some MI t-shirts if you'd like. Thanks, guys.